Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of STEM Girls Virtual. My name's Emily, and I'm here on behalf of Cincinnati Museum Center. On this show, we talk about different careers in the STEM fields, those fields being science, technology, engineering, and math. Today, we have environmental consultant and beekeeper Brandon Reynolds with us. Brandon, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. This is super cool. I've been stoked ever since you first told me about it a month ago.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad we're able to sit down and chat, even though it's virtual. So there's a lot I want to talk to you about, but my first question is, you went to University of Cincinnati and you studied marketing and sales, but you have since moved on to a different career. So I kind of just want to see how you ended up where you are now. What
Yeah.
was what was your journey?
No, that's the wild question. And whenever I have to give a talk, or even when I'm first meeting people, they're like, okay, well, you're a beekeeper. That's kind of like the weirdest thing to say at a party. But people always remember, like, oh, that's the beekeeper guy. He's gotta have some cool stories. But yeah, I went to, I would say, the University of Cincinnati, where I went to college, and high school, St. X, where I graduated from in 2010. Both supercharged my development, because St. X was very centered on our motto was men for and with others. So all in all, what that means is, hey, you're yourself, but there are other people around you and other things around you that you've got to navigate and work with to succeed. Bottom line. There's so many different things you could say about that, but that's how I took it. And then you go to UC, and then they take that mantra and then connect you with other people from around the country, around the world, that are all trying to work to achieve their goals. And so for me, I went to UC and I got into their Honors Plus business program. And our tuition was paid for. We went to Europe to learn from really smart people, and we took all these really hard classes, and it was great. It was a 5-year super packed business program. But one thing that I always struggled with was that whenever I went on, we had this thing called co-ops. So you work a semester, go to school. You've heard of it before, especially for STEM careers. And I could never find, and my major was sales, and I could never find at any of these companies I was working for, like, anything that I felt super passionate about selling. Like, I wake up in the middle of the night, like, new idea, and write it down. And I always wanted to experience that feeling where you just wake up every day and, not saying I'm a workaholic, but when you get to a point where your work melds in with your life, you're no longer counting the hours, you're just, counting the number of good things you're doing. And I can never find anything that gave me that feeling until my 4th year. So 2014, this is our junior year. And I was working in the garden at Carriage House Farm, pulling weeds, making sure that, all the herbs were growing properly. And then I worked at, for a startup at the Brandery that was all about, sustainability. And for the first time ever, my brain, went like, bing. The little hamster in my head just started, running faster. And I just knew that I had to do something green. And so after I graduated college, I ended up working for an advertising agency. And that taught me a lot. Whether it's getting people to eat Mentos caramels or ride the Cincinnati Bell connector streetcar. It's just, there's so many different things that I learned there. And when I ended up deciding to leave, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy the company. It was just the fact that I had the burning question in my head. Okay, I love sustainability. Every time I go home, my social media feed is beeping. Bees are dying. Bees are so important for biodiversity, all this stuff. And I just knew that I had to find some way to advertise bees so that people actually cared enough to help keep them around. And so that's the whole journey. I think it went full circle to, like, Men for Others, UC, advertising, or, start sustainability, advertising. And then it's like all of those together is what we're doing now.
Yeah, and I love how you described where, if you love what you're doing, kind of the hours melt away in that sense. And not everyone is passionate about their job.
Yeah.
So those that are, it's rare in a lot of instances and lucky. So that's awesome. You were able to find this path that you're currently on. And you kind of answered this a little bit, but what about beekeeping? So you're talking about bees, but beekeeping, what got you to become a beekeeper?
Wow. Oh man. So So literally I left my job in advertising, and mind you, in my brain, it's just, I knew nothing. I knew bees made honey. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
And there were all these different types. There's the big ones, there's small ones, different colors. But I didn't know, I just knew that their populations were going down. And I knew I had to figure out, something, like I got to find some way to help, because if the bees go, as you already know, there goes our food supply, there goes our biodiversity. The earth all of a sudden turns into this really weird rock floating through space with no life on it. And so I actually remember that farm I told you about, Carriage House Farm. I actually called the farm manager one day right after I left my advertising job. And I'm like, hey, I've got 3 months till I'm broke. And in that time, while I try to find something to do, would you mind teaching me beekeeping? And the farm manager, Richard, who's still there, he was like, yeah, man, because I'm really busy and I'd rather focus on, growing this side of the farm operation and letting somebody else take care of the bees. And so with that, for the first year, 2017, April, throughout the rest of the year, I learned as his apprentice, learned about bees, read a bunch of books, went to some bee meetings in Indiana with Southwestern Indiana Beekeepers Association, and just learned from so many people. 2018, I more so took over the operation and, got things stabilized. And then in 2019, I learned, and I don't want to keep answering your questions ahead of time.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Then I learned, okay, Brandon right now is just keeping bees places. We're keeping bees at the farm. At that point, I had my first hive in the city at a close mentor's house. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, I got into this because I wanted to, help pollinators grow and stay around. And the one way that I found to do that was through planting pollinator habitat,
Okay.
On people's properties, businesses, wherever. And so that whole journey, how I got into beekeeping, it literally all it started with was popping a question to Richard at the farm. I was curious about how to get involved. And I always saw him doing bees when I was at the farm in 2014 as an intern.
Yeah.
And I look at him, I'm pulling weeds out of the herb garden, and I see this guy with his hazmat spacesuit on, reaching in this box with just bees everywhere. I thought he was psycho. But after 3 years of learning about it on social media, on the news, I then knew, like, okay, that's beekeeping. It's a thing. And, bees do so much more for us than give us honey. They give us, the food and life that we rely on.
Right. And early on, you said you just happened to call him. You knew of him. You had worked with him a little bit. You just called him out of the blue and asked, like, can you teach me this? And I think a lot of kids, maybe teenagers, college students, don't know that they can do that.
Yeah.
If there's something you're really interested in, 9 times out of 10, if you call someone and say, I want to learn about your job, they'll help you learn about their job one way or another, whether it's talking to you directly, letting you job shadow. Right now during COVID, that's probably pretty difficult. But, 9 times out of 10, if you call and say, I want to learn this, or I want to be introduced to it, most people want to talk about their job.
Well, and that's that's a really good point, because somebody asked me the other day. They said, hey, Brandon, how do you get deals? Or how do you build, connections, or find the perfect client, or, how do you find the perfect business partner to do a collaboration with? And I said, hey, this is super simple, Stone Age thinking, but I get most of my connections, and like you were talking about this career path, I get most of that through 2 things: gratitude and curiosity. It's like, hey, thank you for doing X, Y, Z. Like, is there any way I can help? Or is there any way I can learn what you're doing? And I kid you not, every time I talk to somebody, luckily, if I hear back, or, when the conversation goes further, they say, oh, well, nobody asked me that. And in my head, it's like, that's so weird, because I don't know if it's all the anime that I've watched and the video games I've played, the books I've read. There's always like a master mentor.
Yeah.
And that's how the progression of the story goes, is you follow this mentor and they teach you so many things. So I would say, for definitely the STEM girls, you know, that is a tried and true way that people are forgetting about because they're so distracted. And a lot of times, especially in this younger generation, we think we know everything, but one of my friends, she always says, you know nothing, Jon Snow. You don't know, you don't know everything. And as soon as you accept that what you think you know is probably just this small in terms of the greater community, then you'll be a lot more humble. You'll ask a lot more questions and you'll learn a lot faster.
Yeah, other past interviewees have really talked about the importance of a mentor or mentors or being a mentor, giving back, and then also just collaborating in general. I interviewed a chemist who was presented around the world, and she really spoke about how important it is to work with people who are different from you, who are at different stages in their careers, because they're going to be thinking maybe differently than you, and it's easier to maybe find a solution that way. So yeah, it's really important to have a mentor and to be willing to work with others, no matter what your career is, whether it's in the STEM field or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's how I just cold emailed you.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just got to go and take a chance. And
I would say the chance is super important because when I look back at my short life, I'm only 28, so I'm still basically, STEM girls, you're probably what, in between 7 and 14.
Yes.
So I guess for some of you, I've lived you're half of my life. So I've lived double your life. And I'm still considered a kid in terms of, some of the people that I look up to. And so if you look at you right now, if you start progressing and learning and asking questions, the sky's the limit,
Right. And yeah, and I've spoken with other past interviewees who were told they're interested in two opposite things, biology and like dancing, and they were told you have to pick one, and this person didn't pick one. And I think that's important for kids too, that if you're interested in something and you want to learn about it, you don't have to make a career out of it, but it could be a career if you really wanted it to. So at 14, no one expects you to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And even if you're 30 and you want to switch careers, like you can do that if you want to. Like, well, it's okay.
And I know I need to stay focused on track, because I know you got your questions, but you keep dropping these gold nuggets, and I just got to say something real quick.
But we're going off script right now, everyone.
Well, we're going off script, but that's a really good point, and I want to touch on that because a lot of times they say choose this or this.
Yep.
And sometimes when you choose this one, part of you still thinking like, oh, I really actually like that one. Can I have it? Can I have them both?
Yeah.
And what I've noticed, even with social media for Be the Keeper, I've really benefited from, like, say, let's even look at, what I said before, advertising. I got in advertising for a year and 7 months, almost 2 years. Let's say 2 years. I got in advertising, and then I worked at like a farm and saw a guy do bees. And I really like cool, funny Instagram videos. So I didn't just focus on the advertising. I didn't just focus on my farm roots or farm, internship in the past. I blended them all together and learned about, as much as I could about each. And then now all of a sudden there's this new mold that a lot of people haven't seen before, because it's not one thing or the other. It's a combo.
Yeah. And I think also for younger people watching, the environment is talked about a lot. And I think a lot of jobs, no matter what your job is in the future, whether you're a chemist working in a company or you're an environmental consultant, the environment is going to play an impact on your job. So, being introduced early into environmental causes is pretty important. And no matter what you do, I think it'll play a role, and you've had a passion for that. You saw it about it on social media, and like, here you are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's neat.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask a scripted question now.
Okay. I like held myself back at that last one. I'm like, oh, there's so much I can say, but like,
no, it's okay.
Close it.
Yeah. No. So you mentioned you have a Instagram account called Be the Keeper, and we'll share your Instagram tag on the event. But can you kind of talk about the work that you do as Be the Keeper, your neighborhood beekeeper?
Yeah. your neighborhood, friendly neighborhood beekeeper. I always thought, I always wanted Be the Keeper to be like a Spider-Man, like superhero, save the day with the bees.
I was thinking like
Um,
Mr. Rogers type thing, but no, the
Mr.
superheroes
Rogers,
much cool. Mr. Rogers was a superhero. So
superhero,
that's
yeah,
fine. That's fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think superhero storytelling for sure. I think for so for Be the Keeper, originally, like I said before, it was just Brandon keeping bees places. I'm keeping bees at the farm, I'm keeping bees at my mentor's house, but I'm learning, this whole process. I think for me, that process, I kind of might sound like I'm dumbing down the process, but just keeping the bees it totally rewired my brain, because all of a sudden I went from doing stuff on my laptop, my computer, and college, you're writing papers, everything you're doing is like digital. You're sending it off to somebody and hoping they respond to your email. That was most of my life. Like that, never have I gotten something, and I mean, not never, but a lot of times you might build something on Google SketchUp, if you're building a model. But when was the last time you went out there and actually, chiseled some wood or built something with your hands and used all of your senses? And so I think that for me, well, I know that for me, doing the bees centered me. And really, I think if somebody could do a brain scan in the past and then do a brain scan now, I definitely feel a lot more developed. And so when we think about what Bee the Keeper does now, we're not just keeping bees anymore. Now it's, to save the bee populations. And mind you, honeybees is just one species out of 4,000 in North America. That's the last stat that I saw. There's, thousands more in other countries and other nations, continents. But if we're trying to create this system that grows bee populations, we can't just put bees places. We can't just sell people honey. We have to create this new system that focuses on planting pollinator habitat. So when we look at our offerings right now, I give the big three. The first is we provide, we work with businesses, like corporations, municipalities, so government contracts, and residences, whether you're an individual family or you're an HOA, we work with you to put in a bee-friendly pollinator habitat on your property. And so outside of the landscape, and the second offering is once we put in that pollinator habitat, and I'm talking specifically for corporations for these next two, then we can, clients can plus up their service and add a number of beehives to their property, which then brings us into our third offering is we do really engaging programming, whether it's, bottling honey, turning it into a honey jam, using some berries from the pollinator habitat we planted 2 years ago. It's all about getting the programming, tying all of the experience together so that, okay, it's not just a pollinator habitat that's saving bees on your property. It's also, the employee engagement that's showing people exactly how important that is and what all that means.
Oh, that's awesome.
So hope you can see the progression. It's not just
Yeah.
bees now, it's the whole picture.
Right. That's where the environmental consulting aspect comes in as well. Planting these bee pollinator areas around, I'm guessing the cities or county, or how far does this extend?
Well, now, I mean, we just came out of a startup accelerator program with Flywheel called Sustainable Cincy. If you guys are watching this, I love you very much. And that was a great competition program. And so our trajectory, we might have been going like this before, but now I think it's more just, a complete change. And, we're having a lot more conversations with business just because our structure just got more tightened, more polished through the Flywheel program. But right now it's just in Cincinnati proper. But, when I think about the future and the way our business is set up, next year I wouldn't be surprised if we're doing gigs in Indiana, if we're doing gigs in Kentucky. And I want to say the tri-state within the next, 2 or 3 years, I would really love to say on our annual report, hey, we're constantly, over the past 3 years, we've grown bee populations and seen an increase in biodiversity in all 3 states.
Yeah, that would be really neat to see what the future holds for that, and I hope it's very successful.
I hope so too, and maybe even some of the STEM girls we could, they'll be on the
when we're able to do programs back in person, you'll probably be one of the first people I'll call.
I hope so. And then if they say like, oh, we don't want that guy, but like, hey, he's got some honey. He's got honey. Okay, we'll
No.
bring him in.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So as a beekeeper, you mentioned earlier that you saw your friend wearing kind of this hazmat suit, but what kind of gear do you need to wear and use to do beekeeping safely?
Okay, this is actually funny. Richard, the guy I was telling you about, who wears the full hazmat suit. Richard doesn't like to get stung,
But yeah.
which doesn't really happen that often. A lot of people think bees. It's either bees, honey, or you get stung. That's the only two things people know about bees. Which it's really there's a whole educational component as to showing people like, hey, that's not actually, um, you know, that's not all they do. But I would say this year, it's what is it, 2020? I've been beekeeping, the most I ever have. I probably got stung like 8 times the whole year, just because it's a vibe. You read the situation, you read the vibe,
Mhm.
and most of those times it was because I might have dropped a frame or been moving too fast. But I don't really wear like Richard. He wears the whole suit, and
Mhm.
he always laughs at me because he's like, all you're wearing is a jacket, and I wear a jacket which is like half of the hazmat suit. I roll my sleeves up because the arm, like at the arm, it's too big, so it's like doesn't actually fit. So I pull it up so it fits. I got the veil, and I just wear shorts most of the
Okay.
time. And if it's kind of a colony that's being a bit more protective because they're trying to keep they're really focused on something, then I'll wear some pants just so I don't have bees going everywhere. But
Mhm.
usually you will see Be the Keeper chilling in somebody's backyard with a jacket, sleeves rolled up, and some shorts, wearing some Allbirds. That's my
Okay.
typical get up.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so working with honeybees, obviously we've been talking about them. What besides, we know they produce honey, but
Right.
there are other things that the honey can be used for that we use in our like everyday lives. Can you kind of touch on those a little bit?
Geez, one day you literally have to tell me, like, the questions you're asking are like really triggering my brain. I'm like, thank you for getting in there. This is a really good question. Um, we could go super deep on it. But a lot of people, I mean, let's even go,
We
we
can
could
go
go super,
semi deep.
I'm going to go semi deep, but,
Okay.
keep us still rolling. So a lot of people, they think bees, they produce honey and they produce wax for candles. This is the one thing that I'm going to say, but I'm not going to go into detail on. This is what the next thing that I'm going to tell you about is when all of us STEM people go to the hives when we can meet in person again. I'll show you what this is. But there's another product called Propolis.
Okay.
It's made out of tree and plant resin. They coat the entire hive in it. Um, and it's kind of like a gum, like a gum that they coat the whole hive with, and it acts as their immune system, and it has so many antimicrobial properties. And so there's a whole conversation, as you can tell, there's a whole conversation we could have just about propolis and what that does for colonies and even humans. But most of the products people think of are honey, wax, and propolis, with honey being the overwhelming leader because
Right.
we use so much of it. And even with honey, a lot of people think it's just something that you can just ingest and eat. Whereas when you really dig into the character of what honey is, a lot of people for thousands of years, I'm telling you, like I said, nothing, we know nothing. People for
Right.
thousands of years, we can't even think of thousands of years. But humans have known about honeybees and the honey properties of honey for thousands of years, not just decades, thousands of years. And what they've been doing is they rub the honey on cuts and burns. And because honey has so many antimicrobial properties, it's got a really unique pH.
Hmm.
Um, there's low water content, all these things that you can look up on Google. It actually, we reach for the medicine cabinet and grab Neosporin and rub it on a cut. Whereas for thousands of years, people rub honey on it. And I've seen it personally because we've got 2 cats right now, and they always scratch me sometimes when I'm holding them too long. And I'll rub honey on it. I'll notice that my scratch heals, quickly. And after a few months, you barely even notice that it's there. So
Hmm.
honey is really a crazy awesome product. But I would say my favorite all-time product, outside of those 3, I love them. Brandon, Be the Keeper, Chief Bee's favorite product that bees make is actually the biodiversity that they create for. I mean, if you think about it, bees, they pollinate, they're constantly in tune with the environment. But if bees disappeared, all those food, the blueberries, the lemons, the oranges, the coffee, the carrots, all those different things, and I can keep going. I think avocados are up there if you love your avocado toast. All that stuff would disappear if bees were not around. And so, and even think about like if you're you know, your whole diet, because the animals that you may, you know, the chicken or eggs or whatever, the animals, they eat foods from the environment that have been pollinated by bees too. So you just think the whole system would collapse without them. And so my favorite thing is the biodiversity and the really creative foods that we can eat as a result of them doing their thing.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'll allow that answer because it's definitely tied to bees, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Um,
Thank you.
well, we've touched on it a lot that bee populations have been dwindling. So can you kind of tell us why that's happening? I think a lot of us could guess why, but can you kind of tell us why bee populations are dwindling?
Yeah, and that's another question that's huge. Uh, there's so many different factors. A lot of people in the world now, there's a buzzword called colony collapse disorder, CCD. Um, I like to think of if you think of CCD, think of the dun dun dun,
Okay. Yeah,
just for context, with a deep voice. And what colony collapse disorder is, and the way I explain it to people is, it's just the combination of so many negative inputs, whether it's pests like the varroa mite, lack of bee habitat and lack of forage, like lack of food, lack of flowers, and pesticides, herbicides. You know, there's so many different problems that all, when they impact the hive at the same time or colony at the same time, it's kind of like when you see in the movies, somebody just goes, ugh, they faint, you know, because your brain gets overloaded. Think about when a colony gets overloaded with all these negative factors, that, I mean, it's worse than fainting. The colony actually no longer exists at this point, but then the colony essentially collapses, and that's happening for, you know, honeybees across the world, and even a lot of our native bees, because they're all in tune with the environment. The second that all of these negative factors appear, everybody, the whole system's stressed. Um, so I would say, for us, when you were saying, you know, why do we do what we do as a company? What's our focus? The way we want to impact colony collapse and the collapse of all bee populations, and mind you, when I say bees, what I really want to say is all pollinators, because a lot of the pollinators share the same food source. But that's a story for another day. But when you look at the name Be the Keeper, it's kind of a play on words. It's keeper. Like when you think of a zookeeper, or, you know, oh, they're a keeper. You know, it's somebody that is so on board with protecting, you know, XYZ, like a zookeeper. I've been hanging out at the zoo a lot lately, or not lately, but, you know, I've been talking to my friends that work there, and I've always been hanging around. Thane Maynard is who I want to grow up to be like one day. You should see how much they care about the animals that are under their care. And so the way we're actually keepers in our organization is, like I said before, through planting that pollinator habitat, so that while there are pests and diseases and pesticides and herbicides, if we at least knock one of those off and increase habitat, while we work on convincing people that spraying Roundup on weeds is not that good of not a good idea, or you know, having only grass in their yard isn't the best thing. While we work on those other problems, at least we can ensure that the habitat, that stressor, is gone.
Yeah. And that leads into a couple other questions I have is, and I'm going to combine these two. I'm going to put you on the spot, but it sounds like one way people can keep bees safe is having some sort of pollinator site on their yard. So, like, can you recommend what kind of flowers might be good, or can they contact you if they're interested in having something installed in their yard?
For sure. Definitely, you can contact me. But I honestly want to say, a lot of people ask me the question like, "Hey, what plants should I use? What should I do? What should I do?" Da, 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 da. And in my head, I know a bunch of plants. You know, maybe not as much as a plant guru would know, because they just dream and, you know, think about plants all types of the day. But I would say, honestly, you can reach out to us. We'll get everything rocking together. But I would say the first thing I would do is deepen your education about plants, as much as you can. And the haven, and I'm gonna need all y'all to write this down, whether you're, STEM girls or whoever, write this down. The Civic Garden Center. It's on Reading Road. You know it. Boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
Hey, I kid you not, in 2017, when I first started my green life, I took an introduction to composting program with my friend Kylie Johnson. We're still best friends. And I learned so much about that. And that really got my mindset ready for bees. But they also do an annual plant sale. And Greg Torres, they do, he does a annual, or all the time throughout the year, actually, a pollinators presentation. I would say, as opposed to just contacting us, sure, contact us, we'll get it done. But for your personal, you could do this and contact us. Get with the Civic Garden Center. Say, hey, I know the crazy bee guy. He says we can take some pollinator classes, or at least walk around the grounds and see what you have. And I guarantee you, I could give you 10 plants right now. I can go make you a design. But you taking the time to connect with the Civic Garden Center, your brain, will extend even further beyond what just looking up top 10 pollinator plants could do for you.
Yeah,
we interviewed
Kylie and Ellie, I think back in August for STEM Girls. So they have a lot of great programs. So yes, Civic Garden Center, we'll list those as one of our resources for this episode, because they do a lot of awesome work. So yeah, okay. They do cool things, and they're a great resource for the city to have.
And they love STEM.
Yes, they have a STEM program for high schoolers out there watching right now. They have a program called Green Girls in STEM that does a cohort every summer, and you work with Kylie, and it's really, really great. So we will we'll include some information about Green Girls in STEM in this episode too.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'll be great. So you've alluded to this and like things that you really enjoy, but do you have like a favorite thing about being a beekeeper?
Wow.
You can list many favorites if you want.
I would say, because I wrote this down. I was like, I have so many favorite things, and in my head it changes day by day, because there's so many things that I love about what bees do. And what I'm thinking today is, let's just think about this, right? There are thousands, 20,000, 30,000 of bees in a single colony, right? And so when you think about it and you see an individual bee on a flower bounce from dandelion to dandelion to dandelion, mind you, I really love dandelions. Some people don't, but dandelions are one of the first food sources for bees coming out of winter. So love your dandelions. But when you see a bee going from place to place to place, that's just one bee. And you think, oh, that's an insect, that's a bug doing its thing. And so, but somebody really tweaked my brain a couple of months ago. They said, well, are bees insects or mammals? And I was like, of course they're insects, because there's no, they're cold-blooded when it's a single bee, so if it's cold outside, it affects their body temperature. They're insects for sure. And he's like, well, let's talk about what makes mammals. And mammals are warm-blooded. They maintain a constant temperature. I'm like, true. And he's like, well, bees, their hive, they maintain a constant temperature of 95 degrees in the cluster all year round. In the winter, it might be a little tighter because it's colder, but it's 95 degrees constant. And just like humans, they maintain a constant body temperature. I said, okay, that's interesting. A lot of things that one thing people don't know is bees, they produce this bee milk called a royal jelly. And that's what they use to feed their young. So they produce milk. They're warm-blooded in terms of the colony. They respirate. So the colony, they've got bees that are dedicated to bringing air in and flowing air out to keep the moisture content, at a certain threshold and keeping the temperature. I'm telling you, blowing my mind right now. So they respirate, they breathe as a colony. They feed their baby larva bees milk, and they keep a constant temperature. And I'm like, they're sounding a lot more like mammals. They've got hair, and they also forage for food. And so in my head, this is blowing my mind, because you've got bees as an individual, and then you've got bees as a superorganism. And so when you ask me, like, what do I love about bees? Biggest thing that constantly just blows my mind is just how, as a soup, like individually, they're doing their own thing. You know, individually, bees are foraging. You know, you can't really tell. You can tell that they're foraging, but you don't know where the hive's going, you know, or where they're going, where their hive is. You know, you just see one bee. But then when you see a giant superorganism, you know, when I open up a hive and pull out frames of bees, for me, it's a constant reminder of just how powerful we can be as humans if we act, if we have more of a team mindset as opposed to a me mindset. And so that's my favorite thing about the bees, is just their collaboration, the fact that they're so in tune. I mean, this is another thing. Bees, everything that they do depends on the environment, and they recognize that. And their food, the way they raise their young, everything is in constant flow with the environment. And I think for like I said before, every time I get into the beehive, it's like a constant example, a reminder for me to be more centered. Every time I see them, it just shows me that humans, us people, we've fallen away from being that in tune with the environment. And so, and so seeing the bees and how they rely on it, and how everything they do, they pollinate, they propagate the environment. We have a lot to learn on our side to create businesses, to create goals, lifestyle changes that, you know, we systematize caring for the earth. And so that's my favorite thing about bees, is just, it's showing me that the possibilities of togetherness.
Oh yeah, no, that was a lovely way to put that. Yeah, so just, and again, we've talked about with younger people today that, you know, that the environment will play an important role in their life, and a lot of them already realize that, and a lot of them are already doing things to help the environment. But yeah, just hearing about one type of insect and the role they play and the major impact they have is important to hear again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So
It's super crucial.
yeah. And so anyone who's interested in learning more about beekeeping, I know there's a lot of sites out there, or learning more about the environment and the impact bees have on them. Do you have some resources we can share with our viewers?
Yeah, I'd say number one thing I tell people is to get outside. Bottom line, get outside. Your brain will eventually figure it out. So I'm going to go the outdoor route and then give you a couple resources for digital. But go outside, and, you know, like I said, go to the Civic Garden Center, walk around. You know, I know, you know, you got your parents and stuff. Everybody, when COVID first hit, everybody was taking walks. I think people are still taking walks, but in the beginning, it was crazy. It was just like, I've never seen this many people just walking up and down my street. I was doing this. Yeah, you were doing the same thing. I go on walks now. I used to never go on walks.
Yeah.
Because I'm landscaping all day. And by the time I get home, the last thing I want to do is go back outside and sweat. But I would say just go on a walk, go walk through the Civic Garden Center, go through the Cincinnati parks. You got so many cool parks. Walk around the parks.
As a city and county, we're very lucky to have the parks that we do.
Very lucky. I want y'all to Google the word. It's Google DESERT, desert. And then look up, go to a Cincinnati park, and then see how lucky you are. Yeah. So get outside, and there are a lot of organizations like the Civic Garden Center. Connect with them. You know, if you're at a Cincinnati public school, look up Adventure Crew. I was wearing an Adventure Crew shirt earlier. I don't know where it is, somewhere over there. They actually specialize. I've been volunteering with them for like 3 or 4 years now, in getting young people outdoors. And you know, whether it's kayaking, fishing, biking, mountain climbing, whatever, you know, they're constantly helping people build a relationship with the environment. And then once you do that, then I'd say, hey, go get some books on bees. And I feel like just DM me. Y'all can find me on @BeTheKeeper on Instagram. I'll give you some cool books that I like, and introduce you to some blogs that'll be really helpful for you. And then, you know, our Instagram content, a lot of it is really educational about bees, so we can always play there.
No, that's awesome, and that's a great way. Yeah, getting outside. It is amazing. There's another organization that popped in my head that we talked about before we started recording, is Groundworks Ohio.
Oh, Groundwork, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a great, another great for especially environmental work and interest. So they're past, Sophie is a past interviewee as well. So we'll list some information about Groundworks Ohio River Valley. They have a young adult and adult series of programs.
Yep, Green
Yeah.
Corps
Yeah.
and the Green Team. You know, it's just, and
Yep.
then Sophie, that's my homie Tanner, who has Groundwork. You know, I like when I was first getting green, I found out about him from some articles, and I wanted to be just like the guy. Now we're friends. So,
Yeah. See, that's awesome. You reached out and
group.
yeah. So we've come to the end of our interview, and I have one more question for you, and that's what advice would you give to, and you've touched on this a lot throughout the interview, but what advice would you give to young kids and young adults who might be interested in a career in the STEM field?
That's deep. I would say, let's think back to what you said before. You know, a lot of people say either or. The answer is either A or B, A, B, C, or D, all the above. Well, let's say, keep it simple, A, B, or C, right? And for me, that's sometimes a lot more detrimental because as an entrepreneur, what I've learned is that a lot of and this is a lesson I learned from a really close mentor. Actually, the mentor that I have the beehives at, I have my initial urban hives at. They said as an entrepreneur, the answer is not either or, it's yes and. Yes and. Like what it gets your brain thinking, like as opposed to thinking either or, if you change your mindset to thinking yes and what else? Any other questions, any other routes that we can take, it just takes your brain from a closed loop to an open open network. And so for advice, for any of y'all, anybody out there looking for a STEM career, which that's the future. That's, you know, think about it, bees, STEM, everything is connected. I would say, you know, you have to, you know, look at all of your interests, and then, you know, really see, you know, where I know you're only, you know, you're half my age, and, you know, everybody's asked you what you're passionate about, but just think about, you know, what you enjoy doing, and then just stick with those and try to learn as much as you can. For me, I always love going outside. I always love hanging with people. When I was in college, I was in, you know, a lot of student organizations, but sustainability is one thing that I always held dear. I got lucky because since I had gotten so good at, you know, finding ways to relate with people through, you know, same next student government, all these things that you see, I can now introduce people to this new concept that, or not new, but it's, you know, a lot of times people don't know where they can go to be more green. And it's very intimidating sometimes. It's like going from never planting a flower before to, you know, a whole fruit forest. It's like never shooting a basketball to being LeBron James. It's very intimidating. And so I say just start small where you can, you know, learn if you want to, like, if you want to, you know, learn about space, get a telescope, no, not a telescope. That might be expensive, but, you know, get a book on you know, different planets, read about some past explorers, watch some space movies, and just get in where you can. And I guarantee you those small incremental steps that you take, you know, if you're 14 now, and let's say if your goal being proficient is 100%, if you just learn 10% for the next 10 years, you're already leagues ahead of where you are now. And you'll just be 25. I'm 28. You're younger than me, still balling. And so last thing I'll say is when you find something that you love, something that you want to continue learning about, the way I would define success in that aspect is you're continually doing something that you love and exploring it, but also succeeding where you can. And I guarantee you, when you wake up for the rest of your life, that momentum will carry you through anything.
Oh yeah, snaps. That was great. That was great. Yeah, and I think when it comes to STEM a lot, there's a reason why STEAM is a thing. You know, incorporating art. A lot of scientists, you have to be creative in what you do. So if you have an art background, you're creative in that aspect. So that blends into what you're doing in a STEM field. So if you, as a kid, if you really enjoy art, but you also really enjoy chemistry, you can do both. Yeah. There's a lot of potential.
Art is everywhere.
Yeah.
Earth is spelled earth for a lot of reasons. EARTH. Hope I spelled that correctly because we're on Zoom. But art, EART, art. Art is a part of life. And the way you take all of your experiences and pull them together, that's art.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, Brandon. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
This is great. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys soon.